Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Pokemon Film Perspectives, and today we're going to be discussing the 9th animated film to be released as part of the Pokemon franchise, Pokemon Ranger and the Temple of the Sea. Once again, apologies if you hear a bzzz at any point during the video, again, using my phone as a light, so unfortunately that is a side effect whenever it gets an alert. Anyway, what's my history with this movie? Once again, ads. I didn't watch this movie when it first premiered on Cartoon Network, and I didn't get the DVD until I started actively collecting the Pokemon films for my collection. However, I did once catch the tail end of this movie when it was on TV, and again, that really isn't enough to form an opinion on it. In fact, the first time I actually saw this film in full was, well, like with Destiny Deoxys, I saw it as part of Hellfire Comms doing a commentary on it. And no shade to Hellfire Comms, I love Hellfire Comms, but at the same time, you can't really form your own opinion of a movie when you have people talking over it, is what I'm saying. As such, when I finally did get this DVD, I was able to get my own opinion on it. With that said, even with the commentary version that I saw, there were some things that I saw in the film that were kind of dumb. And unfortunately, those dumb things didn't go away upon rewatching this movie. So, does that mean that I think it's worth watching? Well, let's talk about it and find out. And once again, I do have to address the elephant in the room. This is the very first Pokemon film that doesn't use the 4Kids voice cast. From this moment on, the anime dubbing was handled by Funimation / the Pokémon Project, or Pikachu Project, one of the two. I'm sorry, I didn't do my research on this. Point is, it's a different dubbing team working on the anime and the films from now on, so the voice cast has been completely changed. Again, it's not really relevant for these vlogs, considering that it's just me sitting on my ass in this chair talking about the film instead of actually showing clips, but I figure if I don't talk about it, someone else will. Although it does mean that some of the translations are going to be a little bit more accurate from Japanese to English. But anyway, with all that out of the way, again, plot summary. And the film of course, does have its regular prologue. In this case, we open up in the ocean as we see what looks like a glowing egg just kind of tumbling through the rift, just kind of tumbling through the tides and drifting across various underwater Pokemon. However, as it does this, it's soon set upon by various helicopters and a submarine, all of whom are owned by a pirate known simply as the Phantom. And the name is not really appropriate. This guy looks very much like a stereotypical pirate. He doesn't look mysterious. He doesn't look like someone that would fade away into the wind. No, he's big, rough, gruff, and has a stereotypical pirate voice. The only thing he be lacking is the typical pirate mantra and the way of speaking and all of that. Yarr. So, point is, he's not really that crafty, so Phantom doesn't really feel like an appropriate name. However, he is interested in this egg, as he and his people procure it and bring it aboard his submarine. And the reason for this is because, in his own words, he believes this egg will be the key for him to be gaining ultimate power or whatever. However, as the egg is presented to him, before he can actually lay his hands on the egg, one of his crewmen takes the egg and tells him he's not going to get ultimate power today, before he takes the egg and just runs out of the room, with the Phantom sending most of his men after him. However, the thing is, this guy that grabbed the egg, he's not one of the Phantom's men. He may be wearing the colors, but in reality, he's a mole. Specifically, he is from a group called the Pokemon Rangers. And basically, Pokemon Rangers are, well, they're kind of like park rangers, but in a global scale. Basically, they exist to protect Pokemon in all forms and no matter where they are in the world. It even gets to the point where, while Pokemon Rangers typically do have Pokemon as partners like a regular trainer would, they don't use Pokeballs. Instead, what they have is something called a capture styler that basically sends out this little disc that surrounds a Pokemon and then catches them. At which point, while the Pokemon is caught by a ranger, it basically listens to them and does whatever they want, like a typical Pokemon listening to a trainer would. But once the ranger has done with the Pokemon, it basically just lets them go and they go on their merry way and continue being wild Pokemon. So, in a sense, they're different from regular trainers, but in another way, they're basically like, I guess, they're basically just like public officials, like a fireman or a policeman. Basically, they're just kind of a force in the world that help out wherever they can. In this case, this particular Pokemon Ranger, a man by the name of Jack, is here because he wants to keep this egg away from the Phantom. We're not going to be told why until later, but basically, it's an egg, and this guy wants to use this egg for some nefarious doing. So of course, Jackie isn't going to let let that happen. As such, he manages to evade most of the Phantom's crew and get to the surface of the submarine, and eventually he manages to capture a passing by water Pokemon and just rides on its back away from the submarine, and thus getting the egg away from the Phantom's grasp. As such, from there, the film cuts to later as we check in on Ash and Co. as we see them walking through a field, and basically the quartet of weirdos is just drying up in the sun. Yeah, they've been walking for quite some time and they are lost. They have no idea where the next town is, and unfortunately they're running low on rations as their water supply has dwindled down to such a degree that they are basically just drinking droplets at this point. So they need to find water, and they need to find it fast. And thankfully they do happen to find water as they somehow see what looks like these flying orbs of water just over a hillside. As they go check it out, and it turns out they end up finding a traveling circus, specifically a traveling water circus. Basically, this circus is called. Hold on one second. It's called the Marina Underwater Pokémon Show, and basically the members of this circus troupe just practice with underwater Pokemon. What they do is that they have a pair of psychic Pokemon just levitate large bodies of water into the air, and they have their Pokemon swim through it, and basically the performers just jump in the water and do various other aquatic sports for the spectacle of the crowd. And basically what's going on here is that they're just kind of practicing their moves. And so once Ash and Co arrive on the scene, they introduce themselves and basically just say, "Hey, can we get some water?" With the crew for the underwater show, basically saying, "Oh yeah, we can give you some water." And it's here we do get some introductions, as the star of the show is a girl by the name of Lisbeth, and the entire troupe of the circus is made up of her family. As such, they all seem very friendly. Of course, Brock has to be pulled off of Lisbeth because, as we've established, whenever he sees a girl that he thinks is cute, he needs to basically be beaten off with a shovel. But basically, not only do Lisbeth and her family give Ash and Co some water, but they offer them a ride to the nearest town, and on top, even offering them a sample of their underwater show. As once they reach the next town, Lisbeth and Co once again want to performing the show, and even pull Ash and Co into the show. And it's nice, it's cool, it's fun. But the thing is, as Ash and his friends were traveling with Lisbeth and Co, they noticed something. For you see, one of the Pokemon in the water show was a Buizel, a Gen 4 Pokemon, but then again the movies kind of had this thing where they would sometimes introduce Pokemon from later generations in an earlier one. And in the trailer where basically where people usually sleep, they had a bunk bed, and on the top bunk bed was, it looks like a capsule, I suppose, that's normally blacked out. But if you want to see what's inside the capsule, you just have to hit a button, and Buizel decided that he wanted to act like a dog as he began inspecting this capsule, and he wound up pressing a button on it. And it turns out inside the capsule is the egg that we saw Jackie stealing from the Phantom earlier. Although whenever anyone seems to notice it, immediately Elizabeth and her family just try covering it up. And at one point, during the water show, Buizel immediately goes back into the trailer and inspects it again, and accidentally knocks it off the bunk and takes it outside the trailer with it. Or takes it outside the trailer with him. And as such, Buizel runs into May, and May accidentally hits the switch and sees the egg. But before she can examine it further, a clown that was traveling with the water show just politely takes it from her before bringing it to Lisbeth, who brings it back to her personal trailer and just kind of hides it behind a curtain. The thing is, though, when May managed to get her hands on this capsule, she was being spied on. By who? Team Rocket, of course, because as we've established, wherever Ash and Co go, these losers are going to be not that far behind. And as such, they saw May as she looked at the egg, and when James saw the egg, he recognized it. How? Well, apparently Team Rocket has a Gazette. I am not joking. Apparently, the criminal organization has a newsletter that they send out to each of their members. And part of that newsletter includes just stuff that's going on with various other criminals around the world. And one of the articles in this newsletter is something about the Phantom and how he's searching for this egg and is apparently offering a reward to anyone who can find it for him. As such, James sees this and he thinks that maybe they can call the Phantom and potentially get the reward money themselves. themselves, maybe even get a piece of the pie. Of course, Jesse and Meowth are thinking of the bigger picture and think, well, if the Phantom wants that thing, it must be worth a fortune, so why don't we steal it? And as such, well, James does call in a tip to the Phantom once the water show is done and everyone gets packed up and heads out of town. Team Rocket immediately follows behind because they want to get their hands on that egg. And as such, all James manages to do is just let the Phantom know, hey, we found the egg, before he has to hang up. And then as such, Ash and Co continue traveling with the water show, and May ends up staying in Lisbeth's trailer. But as she does, Weasel once again decides to inspect the pod containing the egg, and when he causes the egg to show up again, the moonlight from outside the trailer, as it's nighttime at this point, the light from the moon ends up falling onto the egg, and it casts a strange ethereal light onto May. And as May sleeps, it appears the light has some kind of effect on her, as she begins dreaming. And, she's sleeping. But the dream is a rather intriguing one, as she dreams herself swimming around with basically hundreds of underwater Pokémon and just kind of enjoying herself. But what catches her eye is that among these Pokémon is a glowing one that she doesn't recognize. A Pokémon called Manaphy, which you kind of can guess because that's what it says. And as May is swimming with Manaphy, Manaphy ends up going ahead of the herd, and we see Manaphy going to what looks like a temple under the sea. And as May calls out for Manaphy not to go, she ends up waking up screaming with Lisbeth watching over her. As such, if we cut to later that day, as the troupe has basically stopped to take a break and have some dinner, and May basically explains her dream to everybody, and it turns out Lisbeth and her family are not that surprised to hear about the dream. Mostly because they've had this same dream, or at least Elizabeth has. You see, it turns out that Lisbeth and her family are descendants from a long since, I'm not going to say extinct, but probably fewer than they are before, group of people known as the People of the Water. And once upon a time, the People of the Water dwelled within the ocean. And basically, the People of the Water looked up to all the water Pokemon and basically built this large structure under the sea to honor them. A place called Samoa, or another way, the Sea Temple. And basically, and at the heart of the temple is something called the Sea Crown. Now, the Sea Crown was a very dangerous artifact, but at the same time, it was also very valuable, as apparently whoever has the Sea Crown is labeled the King of the Sea and given ultimate power. And as such, when the Sea Crown was created, well, of course, people wanted it, and so the People of the Water had to basically abandon the temple and make sure that it never fell into the wrong hands. And as such, the temple itself has been lost to time. The temple itself has been lost to time. No one has ever gone back there. No one has ever found out where it is. And there are reasons for it, which I'll talk about later as I get into the plot summary. But basically, descendants of the People of the Water will sometimes have memories connected to the Sea Temple, which manifest as the dreams. And as such, since Elizabeth and her entire family are descendants of the People of the Water, that means they have also had this dream. Although nobody questions why May has this dream, because well, again, she's clearly not the same as them, because they're darker skinned at least. Kind of maybe something close to Native American, but don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. This is a Japanese movie after all. I'm probably talking on my own ass. But point is, nobody really knows why May has the dream as well, although, again, the assumption is that she's also descended from the People of the Water, meaning that so is Max. However, as this discussion is going on, Team Rocket ends up sneaking into Lisbeth's trailer, and they manage to find the egg. However, once the trio of morons gets their hands on the egg, something strange happens, as the egg emits this strange light that connects to Jesse, James, and Meowth, and it causes them all to swap bodies. Jesse ends up in Meowth's body, Meowth ends up in James's body, and James ends up in Jesse's body. And for some reason, their voices go with them. I don't know. It's a little nitpick of mine whenever they do that whole body switching trope. Why do the voices go with them? That doesn't make sense. But whatever. But whatever. They decide to fix this later. Right now, they got the egg and decide to make a run for it. And so as they're leaving Elizabeth's trailer, that's at the same time when the circus troupe and Ash and co. end up coming up on the scene, and they see Team Rocket abandoning the scene of the crime with the egg. And while Team Rocket tries to do their motto and fails because them being in different bodies kind of screws it up, they do end up making a run for it into a conveniently parked pedal flyer as they try getting away. And while at first Ash wants to have Pikachu just send a thunder shock right to knock them out of the sky, the clown from earlier pops up and speaks for the first time as he tells Ash that doing that's not a good idea as it could endanger the egg. Thankfully, the clown has a solution for this as he pulls out the Pokemon Ranger Capture Styler and he uses it to capture a Spearow, and basically Pikachu and Spearow end up working together to fly up to Team Rocket with dropping Pikachu right on top of Team Rocket, grabbing the egg, jumping off onto getting to Spearow, but where Spearow just pops the balloon that they were using to keep themselves aloft, and we're sending Team Rocket flying as they are wont to do. As such, Pikachu and Spearow bring the egg back safe and sound, and yeah, if you can't tell right now, the clown is Jackie. Basically, the reason why Jackie is masquerading as a clown as part of this troupe is because of this egg. Basically, within the egg the egg is supposed to contain the Pokemon Manaphy from May's dream. And basically, the reason why Jackie has employed these people to help him with it is because, well, it's clear that Manaphy is somewhat tied to the legend of the Temple of the Sea, and so basically Jackie sought out Lisbeth and her family and basically recruited them to help him bring this egg back to what he considers its natural habitat. In this case, the Sea Palace, where he hopes it'll be able to hatch safe and sound and away from the prying eyes of psychos like the Phantom who want to use its power for their own gain. Speaking of which, guess who shows up? Yep, the Phantom ends up arriving on the scene as he managed to heed what James said, and he ends up catching up with Lisbeth's troop, he and his crew end up jumping out of some planes, and basically tell Jackie, Lisbeth, Ash, and pretty much everybody else to hand the egg over. He wants it. As such, it causes basically, the group ends up running away from the Phantom as they want to make sure he doesn't get his hands on this thing, and it results in the group kind of splitting up, with Ash and Jackie going off in one direction with the egg, and the rest of the group going off in another direction. As such, the Phantom ends up chasing after Jackie and Ash because they have the egg, and while Jackie is able to pull a switcheroo and separate from Ash, with Ash having the egg while the Phantom chases after Jackie, who he thinks has the egg, unfortunately, Ash kind of loses his grip on the thing as he ends up losing his footing. Thankfully, May arrives on the scene and manages to grab the egg herself as she and Max have it, but the Phantom ends up chasing after them and eventually corners them, demanding that May hand over the egg. Of course, this leads to a struggle with Max involved, and I think Ash gets involved too. But as everyone's fighting over the egg, the Phantom accidentally opens up the container and the egg gets sent flying. Thankfully, May is able to catch it, but when she does, the egg begins emitting a glow, which admittedly it was emitting before it was let out of the pod, but well, it turns out that this is the sign that the egg is ready to hatch, as while May is holding it, it just starts glowing, and in place of the mysterious egg is Manaphy. And I won't deny this, but Manaphy is fucking adorable. This is Manaphy, if I can get the lighting off of here. Holy crap, this is bad. Hold on, let me see if I can get a good look. Holy crap, okay, that is Manaphy. And yes, it's fucking adorable. Manaphy is adorable throughout this entire movie. I'm gonna say right now, if I can list another positive about this movie, it's fucking Manaphy. This little thing is so friggin' cute, and every single scene that it's in just makes my heart swell up with joy. I'm not even kidding. If I can list a benefit to this movie, it's that Manaphy is a thing in it. So I am going to give you credit for Pokemon Ranger and the Temple of the Sea. You did something right there. But immediately as Manaphy hatches, the first thing that Manaphy witnesses is May. And while Manaphy cries because, well, it's basically a newborn, basically the fact that it's hatched at all means that the Phantom can't get his hands on the egg. And what I love is that once the Phantom actually sees Manaphy hatch, he actually gets disappointed, as in his stunned state, it allows Ash and Co. to get away with Manaphy, but basically he just goes, I was gonna hatch Manaphy with my two hands. He briefly just drops the rough and tough accent just because he sounds so disappointed, and I kind of love that. But either way, Either way, Ash, Elizabeth, and Co. managed to get back to Elizabeth's family's trailer, and they basically make a run for it. And from here, it's clear that Manaphy is clearly imprinted onto May, as May was the first person that Manaphy saw upon being born. So Manaphy sees May as its mother, and as such, while May is able to calm Manaphy down and stop it from crying, anytime Manaphy is handed off to someone else, Manaphy starts crying again and is only happy when it's in May's arms. So May basically May just kind of happily accepts the role of mother to this thing, and just to keep it safe. Unfortunately, though, the Phantom is kind of a sore loser, and he still kind of wants Manaphy, and so he and his crew get back in their ships and get back in their planes and ships and start chasing after them. With them even managing to take out the back half of Elizabeth's family's trailer by just shooting grappling hooks at it. Thankfully, everyone's able to get to the front trailer, and so while they lose the back trailer because it falls off a cliff, they're all safe and sound. And eventually, the Elizabeth's family end up driving to what looks like these ancient ruins. And while the Phantom is still hot on their tail, they're able to get into the ruins first, and it turns out that the ruins actually do respond to the people of the water, as basically anyone that's a member of the people of the water wears these jewels or seashells or something that basically is not only supposed to identify them as someone from the people of the water, but these things also have special nifty little gizmos implanted in them. As the grandfather of Elizabeth's family ends up holding his up to a wall in the back of the ruins, and it basically it starts glowing and shows these patterns that can be interacted with. And after inputting the proper patterns, basically a door opens, and Elizabeth, Ash, and Co. all just piled up, end up going inside, and they end up in a water cavern with everyone who has water Pokemon basically just riding on top of them and getting away. And while the Phantom is able to follow them into this cavern, as it turns out, he has some of these ornaments from the people of the water, which are not his. He admits later that he stole them. He ends up when he ultimately gets down to the cistern where the river is that the group used to escape, he basically gives it a search, because unfortunately the water paths underground go off in various directions and have so many branching paths that it'd be impossible to figure out which one the group used to get away. As such, the Phantom does unfortunately write this off as a loss, but he's not out for the count, as he knows that wherever the group is going, they're going to be headed to the Temple of the Sea. And the thing is, the Temple of the Sea is actually the Phantom's end goal here, as he actually wants to get his hands on the Sea Crown. As such, his plan is basically just to find the group when they go looking for the Temple of the Sea, and basically just follow after them from a safe distance. Although when he and his crew go back to his ship, who do they run into but Team Rocket? Yeah, it turns out Team Rocket landed in these ruins after they got blasted off, and apparently whatever Manaphy's egg did to them was temporary, as they're now all back in their proper bodies. And well, they saw Ash and Co. arrive on the scene with the Phantom hot on their heels, and basically Team Rocket has decided that they're going to try and hang around with the Phantom for a while. Mostly because they want whatever treasure he's hunting, and they think that if they can pal around with him and compete and make nice, then maybe, just maybe, they can get their hands on the treasure first and then leave the Phantom high and dry. As such, they convince the Phantom to let them join his crew, and he does let them join as the janitorial staff. So, hey, at least they got their feet in the door. Either way, back with our main group, we see them as they're getting away down the cistern and through the underground cistern, and they do eventually. I'm probably using that word wrong. And they eventually find a mural that's supposed to basically depict the story of Samoa. And it's here we do learn a bit more details about about Samoa and why the Phantom wants Manaphy. You see, the thing is, the temple itself is actually really hard to find, and that's on purpose. Basically, when the people of the water abandoned the sea temple, they put in place several booby traps to make sure that if anyone wanted to find the sea crown, then they would have a hard time doing it. And one of those booby traps was that basically the temple itself has basically a large force field surrounding it that basically causes the temple to blend in with the surrounding sea. And on top of that, the temple itself is unmoored. It's not in any one place at any given time. It basically just follows the tides of the ocean and just goes wherever it wants. So not only is this thing hard to find, but even if you do manage to zero in on where the hell it is, you wouldn't be able to see it because it blends right into the ocean with the force field. However, there are two circumstances where one can actually find the temple. You see, the thing is, this force field that's used to blend in with the ocean only works for pretty much 99.9% of the year, but for that 0.01% of the time, there is a lunar eclipse that occurs, and on the night of that lunar eclipse, basically the camouflage stops working, and you can see the temple. But again, that doesn't really mean jack if you can't find the temple, which is where Manaphy comes in. You see, when the temple was originally built, it was actually built in an area of the sea that the Manaphy Pokemon basically called home. And as such, while the temple continues moving around, every Manaphy in the world just has a genetic memory of finding this place, and thus when they're born, they just instinctively seek it out. They just know where it is. As such, the Phantom wants this specific Manaphy because it will instinctively seek out the Temple of the Sea, and thus if the Phantom can follow Manaphy, he can find the temple and get his hands on the Sea Crown. So yeah, Manaphy's kind of a big deal. Also, apparently he has the nickname of the Prince of the Sea. We'll get back to that later, trust me. But point is, Manaphy. But the point is, if that's the case, that means getting ahead of the Phantom is now an even higher priority because they need to make sure he doesn't get his hands on the Sea Crown. As such, the group manages to get out of the underwater caverns as they end up in the nearby town, and basically Elizabeth's grandpa is able to procure some transportation because he owns a boat which he has his crew bring up to the dock, and well, he pretty much tells the crew they gotta stay behind because he and his family are going to be taking this thing to go and look for the Sea Temple. Also, Jackie's going to help me out because again, procured them. Although Jackie does try to stop Ash and Co from falling because he thinks at this point they've been too involved and this is Pokemon Ranger business, so they shouldn't be a part of this at all. As such, Ash and Co are briefly left at port when Elizabeth, her family, and Jackie all get on board her grandfather's ship and fly away. But unfortunately, Ash and Co decide, you know what, screw this, we want to be part of this adventure anyway, and decide to come along. Made doubly so because, well, she's still taking to her motherly role with Manaphy rather seriously, and so she wants to be there for her impromptu kid. And Manaphy concurs, as basically, with all the excitement that had happened in the adventure, Manaphy did fall asleep, but upon the ship leaving and Manaphy realizing that May's not there, Manaphy begins crying, and, well, to make everybody turn around, Manaphy ends up pulling that body-switching thing again. Only in this case, Manaphy swaps Jack's mind with Ash's, and as a result, Ash ends up in Jack's body holding Manaphy, while Jack is left on the dock in Ash's body. I didn't think I'd like Dragon Fruit Mountain Dew, but I do. As such, Elizabeth and her family have to turn the boat around just to get Jack and Ash's friends on board. But yeah, Ash and Co are in this for the long haul, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. From here, I can only describe the second act of this movie as fluff. There's really no other way to say it. The second act of this film is basically just fluff, as we follow Ash, Elizabeth, and their respective groups as they're making their way out into the ocean following Manaphy. And admittedly, we do get a lot of cute scenes here, as we see scenes of May and Manaphy bonding, and they're pretty damn adorable. We learn Jackie's backstory as a Pokemon Ranger, and we learn that the reason why he wanted to become a Pokemon Ranger was because when he was a kid, he nearly got caught in a snowstorm, but when he tried hiding in a cave, he found himself with a herd of Pokemon who were also hiding in the cave, and basically they all just cuddle up around him to keep him warm. Which, actually, that's sweet. I like that. But unfortunately, this portion of the film also results in one of the things that makes me hate Jack as a character. False drama. You see, Jack sees May and Manaphy bonding, and apparently he don't like any of that shit. Because you see, remember how I said that one of Manaphy's nicknames was the Prince of the Sea? Well, apparently Jack thinks that shit is literal because he thinks that if May and Manaphy were to be bonding closer, then when the time comes for Manaphy to leave, he won't want to leave, and thus Manaphy will want to stay with May. And while Jack tries getting Ash to talk to keep May and Manaphy apart, May overhears them talking, and she does say, "No, it's fine. I can take it. I'll be fine." But Jack's like, "No, Manaphy might not want to leave you, and since he's the Prince of the Sea, he's destined to lead all the water Pokemon, and that you can't deny him that, so you gotta keep your distance from this thing that basically sees you as its goddamn mother, to the point where it's actually learning a few words of English just so that it can say it loves you." Yeah, I think Jack's kind of an asshole at this point. And this is kind of the scene that helps procure it. He has a couple moments before this, but this false drama can go to hell. And yes, it is false drama, because after this, May feels like shit and actively starts keeping her distance from Manaphy. And Manaphy, who is basically at this point a baby, is just kind of wondering, why is Mama staying away from me? Yeah, Manaphy, for the most part, is still acting friendly and nice, but there are times where it clearly questions where the hell May is. And May hears Manaphy being all happy and sweet and nice, and she wants to be involved, but she intentionally is trying to keep her distance because she's afraid that if they get too close, Manaphy won't want to stay at the temple and be the Prince of the Sea and all that bullshit. Again, it's stupid. It's dumb drama, and all it's really there is just to pad out the movie and try and create tension where none really exists. It's stupid. However, the false tension does have something akin to a payoff, because you see, when the group has basically been traveling across the ocean for several days, and they've been watching the phases of the moon, basically keeping track of when a full lunar eclipse is going to occur. And they finally reach this island just on the day when a full lunar eclipse is supposed to occur that night. And of course, everyone's just kind of goofing off, enjoying the water and having fun. But as May is watching it all go down, she tries putting on her bandana, but the wind ends up blowing it out of her hand. Manaphy sees this and basically tries going after the bandana as it goes into the water and gets caught by several water Pokemon. And as such, Manaphy basically spends a good portion of several hours underwater trying to find May's bandana, and people notice Manaphy's absence and decide that they need to go look for her, resulting in May, Ash, Brock, Max, and Elizabeth getting into a submarine and combing the ocean floor to try and find Manaphy, which they eventually do, as we see that Manaphy has managed to find May's bandana, which is still adorable. However, let's go back to the Phantom. You see, the Phantom was keeping good on his promise, and he was tailing the group as they were making their way to the Temple of the Sea, with Manaphy guiding them. And basically, as he sees the submarine scouring the bottom of the ocean, the Phantom thinks that the group is getting ready to do something, and so he gets in his own personal sub to try and follow after them because, well, if they're scouring the ocean floor, maybe it's for something important, so he wants to be in on this. Although when he does this, Team Rocket stows away because, as their roles as the janitors, they've been overhearing everything, and so, like I said, they're trying to just kind of pilfer the treasure of the Sea Temple, but right out from under the Phantom's nose. In the meantime, though, when the group finally managed to catch up with Manaphy, their plan is to go meet back up with everyone on the boat, but unfortunately they get caught in a riptide and the radio gets knocked out, so they can't communicate with everyone. Thankfully, Manaphy is able to lead the submarine out of the riptide, but instead of leading everyone back to the boat, Manaphy instead leads everyone further into the ocean. And as they go through, Manaphy and the submarine seem to vanish, which confuses everyone until the lunar eclipse occurs, and we soon see where everybody went. As it turns out, Manaphy led Lisbeth and co. straight to Samoa. So yeah, they found the Sea Temple, and the Phantom, who was following their sub, sees them go into the temple and he basically is seeing dollar signs as he goes in after them. In the meantime, on the surface, Elizabeth's family and Jackie see that the sea temple is there, and Jackie decides he wants to follow after, as he uses his capture styler to capture a water Pokemon, and using a breathing apparatus, he's able to basically ride on its back and try going underwater to try and find the temple. Unfortunately, though, before he can actually get into the temple, the eclipse passes, and, well, he's now kind of blind. But, thankfully, Ash and Co. managed to get inside the temple, and so now it's just a matter of trying to get further in. And as such, the group just kind of wanders further in, and they do, and Manaphy thankfully does seem to have a connection to this place, as its singing does manage to actually open up several doors for them, and also in conjunction with the jewels of the people of the water, which May now has because Elizabeth gave her the jewels as a consolation for all the false drama. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. May was feeling like shit. Elizabeth went to comfort her and make her feel better. She gave her some of the jewels, identifying someone as a people of the water. Again, I guess that's also part of the payoff. I don't know. It doesn't even really do anything. Never mind. Forget I said anything. It is pointless. Anyway, but either way, it allows the group to venture further and further into the temple of the sea. But following close behind is the Phantom, as his submarine manages to come out, and he basically just chases after them, with Team Rocket popping out of a capsule that was attached to the submarine, as that's where they stowed away, as they try to follow, and basically from this point on in the movie, they really don't do anything anymore. Yeah, they're just back to being in the background. Yeah, that's just their role now. But anyway, the group managed to get further and further into the temple, and they eventually find an altar which has something written on it that's written in the language of the people of the sea. Before anyone can read it, the Phantom comes up and basically says that he should thank everyone for leading him straight to the crown, and as thanks, he's going to let them get a good view of it before he takes it for himself. As such, he goes up to this altar and he's able to read it verbatim, as basically the altar just says that whoever wears the sea crown shall be king of the sea and be given ultimate power. And as such, he holds up his own jewels from the people of the sea, and basically it opens up the altar and causes some more of those markings that we saw earlier in the ruins to appear. And after the Phantom coordinates them, it causes a pathway to open up in front of them through several doors, which the Phantom runs through, with Ash and Co. following close behind. And sure enough, it does lead them to the center of the temple, and in the center of the temple, they find the sea crown, which it's not a crown in the traditional sense. It's basically just a giant structure, just inside what looks like, I guess, a suspended body of water just in the middle of the room, and the structure is just outlined with all these various crystals. Of course, the Phantom sees all these things and basically just goes, hot damn, this is exactly what I wanted, and soon I'm gonna get all my power, and blah bitty blah bitty blah. And as such, while Ash and Co. tell the Phantom, screw you, this power doesn't belong to you, he tells them to fuck off as he basically smacks them aside, or more specifically Manaphy, because Manaphy jumped into the floating body of water and tried to stop him before he bitch slapped the thing away, and so he basically manages to take one of the crystals from the sea crown structure. Unfortunately, though, this causes one of those aforementioned booby traps to kick off, as the water that was suspended in the middle of the room immediately just disappears. And suddenly, water starts pouring in from various parts of the wall. Why? Because it turns out this particular booby trap is causing the temple to sink and flood. So, get out while you can. As such, the group quickly realizes that they're kind of screwed if they stay here, and while it's clear they want to stay and stop the Phantom from getting any more crystals, well, their survival kind of takes priority right now, and so many of them reluctantly make a run for it. As they're running through, they end up running into Jack, as once the temple started filling up, it became visible outside again, so he was able to get into the temple, and thus, as the group is leaving, he's coming, and they let him know, hey, the Phantom's in there, he's stealing the crown, you gotta stop him, and so Jack says that he will, because he's a Pokémon Ranger, and all that crap, and he basically managed to meet up with the Phantom, who's already stolen quite a few crystals. As such, Jack is able to grab some of them away from the Phantom and put them back, but as he and the Phantom are fighting over another crystal, unfortunately, the walkway they're standing on, which is where the crown is, basically they fall off the walkway in their struggle. And unfortunately, the crystal they were fighting over gets lost in a tide. So, That's nice. Although they both get separated because of the same tide too. So hey, it's not every so they do what you can. In the meantime, though, back with the group, everybody gets back to Lisbeth's submarine, and while basically basically they're just planning to go screw this place out. Manaphy is seeing this entire place flooding, and he decides he has to do something as he basically jumps out of May's arms and begins swimming further into the temple, with May chasing after him because, well, she's worried about her proverbial son, and Ash chasing after May because, well, it's Ash. He cares about everybody. And as such, while Lisbeth wants to go after Ash and May, unfortunately, they're hit by a small wave caused by the flooding, and so Elizabeth, Max, and Brock have to, unfortunately, abandon their friends while they're in the submarine. In the meantime, Jack's tide does lead him back to the Phantom submarine, and so he basically manages to get into the submarine, even taking the Phantom's Pokemon. Patot, I think it's been around. Don't quote me on that. Again, I forgot what it was, but basically it's basically a parrot that's supposed to be a musical Pokemon, and basically he and the Chatot, I think, I'm getting it wrong. Apologies. End up making a getaway in the Phantom's submarine, but the Phantom at this point was washed far enough out that he was able to see the temple was flooding, and he realized, oh, okay, maybe I do need to make a run for it. And as such, he ends up basically riding on, and so unbeknownst to Jackie, he managed to hold on to the outside of the submarine as it was getting away. We're basically taking an escape tank, I think it is, or I don't know, is it an engine? I don't know. Basically, he just rides on that and just kind of jets away, and we won't be seeing him again until the end of the movie. In the meantime, Ash and May manage to follow Manaphy back to the center of the temple, where they see Manaphy just struggling to pick up the crystals, which again makes sense why there'd be a struggle. Manaphy's this tiny Pokemon, and these are very big crystals. As such, Ash and May volunteer their own services, and they manage to get to the center of the room as well, as they both begin putting crystals back into the crown. Unfortunately, they're still shy that one crystal that Jackie and the Phantom were fighting over, so they really don't know what to do. And unfortunately, the temple is still filling up with water, so they need to Amscray as quickly as possible. As such, with May with Manaphy and Ash with Pikachu, the pair just run throughout the temple, just avoiding any places that got flooded, and eventually running in circles. But thankfully, all their running does pay off, as they do manage to find where the crystal landed, as it wound up in one of the fountains in the temple. As such, they realize they need to get this thing back to the center of the temple, but with everything flooding as it is, unfortunately, it's going to be a dangerous journey. Well, thankfully, Ash realizes that since he's the main character of the anime, that he may as well do it, and thankfully he's able to protect May, Manaphy, and Pikachu because he found the tank that Team Rocket stowed away in, and he basically has May, Manaphy, and Pikachu hide out in that. It won't be able to get him away, but it'll at least keep him safe for a while. Oh, which reminds me, what happened to Team Rocket? Well, when the place got flooded, they tried to steal the Phantom submarine, and the Phantom caught them just as they were doing that, and basically just gave them the good old heave-ho, but unfortunately, before he could take the submarine, he got shoved aside as well, which is what led to Jack stealing it. But anyway, they're basically they got swept away in the flood, and we won't be seeing him again until the credits. Either way, Ash takes the crystal and basically just runs back to the center of the temple, but unfortunately the center of the temple has now been flooded. And as such, as Ash tries swimming down to try and put the crystal back, he encounters some turbulence. When he drops the crystal and it gets stuck in a part of the floor, he needs to constantly keep getting more air because he doesn't breathe underwater, and while at one point he almost passes out and drowns, it's only thanks to Manaphy using the ability that he used to swap people's minds to basically connect May out to Ash and basically say, don't give up, you can do this, and it gives Ash the extra heave-ho to basically get a good breath of air, grab the crystal, and then manage to put it back in the center of the temple. And well, doing this does cause an effect, and it's not just the temple stops flooding. No, in fact, the crystal begins glowing. And as such, as the temple stops sinking, it begins rising up to the surface, and from there the water begins draining out of the temple, and from the crown all these weird golden tendrils just fly all over the temple, and one even grabs the pod that May and Co are in and brings it out to the surface, and as a result the temple ends up breaching the surface good as new. Unfortunately, and as such, everyone on the surface sees this, and everyone thinks, "Oh, good, oh, it's okay." But the question is still raised: Where are May and Ash? Well, May is thankfully found as they manage to find the the pod that Ash put her Manaphy and Pikachu in. But unfortunately, Ash doesn't seem to be seen right now, so May is a little concerned that maybe he might have drowned under there. Unfortunately, though, before anyone can go back into the temple and search for Ash, who should show back up but the Phantom, who basically just pops out of nowhere, grabs Manaphy, and then just jets away on his little not gonna say jet ski, but whatever the hell he stole off his submarine. At this point, he's basically realized that he's lost. He knows that he's not getting the crown right now, and if he tried to do that again, he'd probably be stopped. So, what's his next best plan? Just grab Manaphy and try again another day. So he thinks so basically he's just stealing Manaphy. Thankfully, though, this is when we finally see what happened to Ash, and it's stupid. I'm not even kidding. So, basically, when Ash put the crystal back in the crown, it wound up glowing because it was manifesting that whole power of the sea thing that the legends apparently alluded to. You want to know how it manifests for Ash? He's flying in a weird golden jet stream. And it looks stupid. I mean, like, good lord, it's actually laughable how stupid it looks. And I get the feeling that this was not what the filmmakers were trying to aim for. I think they wanted this to look like a big, victorious, badass moment for Ash. But no, it's not. It's dumb. It's like legitimately dumb. And it's not the fun kind of dumb. You may see me laughing here, but I'm only laughing at how stupid it is. Like, I can tell what they were trying to do with this, but they failed. It's just dumb. Oh my, it's just so dumb. But dumb it may be, it's also effective because Ash is able to use it to head off the Phantom every time he tries to make an escape. And as such, Ash manages to fly by the Phantom and grab Manaphy before knocking him off of whatever that jet ski thing, whatever that he was using to propel around was. Unfortunately, though, that's when the Phantom's ace comes into play, as his main submarine ends up surfacing right under him, and basically he ain't taking no for an answer. He basically has firepower on his side, so he's basically just going to charge he's now just going to charge the temple and everyone in it without any problems. However, this is when Manaphy's title as the Prince of the Sea comes into play, because when Ash wound up putting the crown back in place, well, it turns out all the water Pokemon wound up reacting and have all converged on the scene. All these different Pokemon, big, small, common, and even legendary, as one of the Pokemon that shows up is Kyogre. He doesn't really do anything, but hey, he's there! Okay, scratch that. He does do stuff, but he's basically just a face in the crowd right now. I feel like his appearance should be a bigger deal than it is, but it's not. He's a legendary Pokemon, and he's not the biggest focus in this movie. I find that to be a little stupid, but whatever. Point is, the water Pokemon do immediately attack the Phantom submarine, and while at first he confuses them using sonic waves, Manaphy is able to use its singing to calm all the Pokemon down and basically coordinate them, and straight to the point, they just absolutely wreck the Phantom submarine, destroying it on the outside, having some of their Pokemon go in and shock it from the inside. Basically, it just becomes dead in the water and just explodes right there and just becomes basically a giant floating tomb with the Phantom and his men either being stuck inside or just abandoning ship. And as for the Phantom himself, well, when it all fell apart, he wound up falling into the rubble, and basically the only thing that keeps him from being crushed is him holding up a bit of debris, and we see that the reason he has this strength is because he's wearing a mech suit underneath his clothes, which actually explains his actions. Basically, throughout the movie, we've been seeing him doing various impossible feats that someone his size shouldn't be able to do, like lifting a giant boulder or running fast, and it makes sense that the mech suit would be the one that's doing all this. Unfortunately, it's at this point the mech suit fails, and the Phantom gets crushed. Doesn't get killed, but he is pinned under a large metal object, and he can't get back up, so yeah, sucks to be him. But, yeah, in this regard, the good guys have won. And as such, Ash basically shares the power of the sea with his friends and Lisbeth and her family as they just kind of fly around the temple, and their jet streams basically come together to make what looks like the real sea crown. As it basically just takes up the entirety of the temple. So, yeah, it's all good. But, well, they still can't let this power fall into the wrong hands. As such, as the power dissipates, basically all the various water Pokemon go into the temple as this little force field goes back up, and it basically just drifts back under the sea, as, well, it's got to go back to being lost if they don't want anyone getting their hands on that power again. And as such, May has to unfortunately say goodbye to Manaphy, which May does kind of have to realize, but as the temple fades away and Ash and Co are back on Lisbeth's ship, or at Lisbeth's family's ship, and they all are consoling May for having to say goodbye to Manaphy, well, who should come jumping over the horizon but Manaphy himself, as it jumps across the ocean and jumps into May's arms. Why? Because it just wants to give a proper goodbye to its mama. And it's just so goddamn sweet. The way Manaphy talks to May, it's clear that it still loves May, and even just says, "Love you, May. Love you, mama." It's again, Manaphy's one of the best parts of this movie, and that's just sweet. But, with that final goodbye, Manaphy does leap off because, well, it's gotta go fulfill its role as the Prince of the Sea or some bullcrap, as it goes back to the temple to make sure that it can't be used to find this place again. And as such from there, May has her own teary farewell, as she knows that she's not okay right now, but she will be later. And thus, from there, that's when the credits roll, as we do get our credits epilogue, as we see that Jackie uses connections to call in Officer Jenny and the rest of the Phantom. We see Lisbeth's family taking Ash and Co back to the mainland, where we meet back up with the crew that manned Lisbeth's grandpa's ship. At which point we go to a hangar where it turns out Lisbeth's family has another trailer on standby, and thus they part ways from Ash and Co. Also, we see what happened to Team Rocket as they somehow wound up in a Waylord. I don't know how that happened, but I'm not going to question it, so there you go. But, yeah, that was Pokémon Ranger and the Temple of the Sea, and my thoughts on it? Okay, I'm going to take this right now. I don't think this movie is awful by any means, but it's not good either. It's really not a good movie. It's just kind of but it's just kind of less than for me. Like, this film feels like it should have more to it, but it's not. The biggest sin, in my opinion, for this movie is that it really does not have a strong emotional core. And I know what some of you are going to say. What about May and Manaphy? And I'll give credit where it's due. I liked the stuff with May and Manaphy in this movie. I am never going to complain about Manaphy when I talk about this movie. Manaphy was fucking adorable, and every single scene that this little Pokemon was in made me smile with just how cute, bubbly, and happy it was. And the way May fawned over Manaphy like a mother was genuinely adorable. And what I loved is that Manaphy loved making May smile. Like I said, Manaphy actually began learning simple English just so that it could say to May that it was happy and that it loved her. And that's so gosh darn sweet. Hell, Manaphy spent several hours looking for May's bandana just because it saw that May lost it. That's goddamn adorable. It's nice, and I like that. The only problem is, it's not enough. It's genuinely not enough. And the thing is, if you wanted to have, because it's not the point, it's not the core of the movie. The core of this movie is not May and Manaphy's relationship. It's a part of the movie, but it's not the core of the movie. It's just a thing that occurs while happening in the movie. The real core of the movie is the stuff with the sea crown. And while Manaphy is an important figure in that, unfortunately, May does not play a huge part in that story, which I think sucks. You think that May and Manaphy having this connection would be this major plot point in the movie, that she'd be the one that had to make the ultimate sacrifice. But no, she's not. And during the climax of the movie, Manaphy and Pikachu are shoved in a tube while Ash has the big hero moment. Ash, who barely spends any time alone with Manaphy, and who basically doesn't have any major character connections to this bigger picture, beyond that he's the main character of the anime who went on this adventure. Hell, Lisbeth would have been a better major character. Her and May, quite frankly. But no, Ash has to take the role, and he's the one that has to put back the crown. He's the one that has to do the stupid Super Saiyan power-up at the end of the movie. And yes, I'm not gonna get over that. That is stupid, and I'm not gonna give it any compliments aside from the fact that it made me laugh. So yeah, it's just sort of dumb. You think that May and Manaphy having this connection would have her be propelled possibly to the forefront as a main character, but no, she's not. She plays the motherly role, and then that's kind of the beginning and end of whatever arc she has in this movie. And I think that sucks. Let's kind of compare this film to another Pokemon movie. Let's talk about Jirachi Wishmaker. While I complained about Jirachi Wishmaker and how I felt that Max and Jirachi should have had like more bonding moments, more personal moments, they at least had something akin to a friendship. And yeah, while I felt that the drama with Ash feeling like he lost Jirachi was played up a bit too much, at the same time, the drama was still something that was a real thing. Because Jirachi was Max's friend, so of course Max would be even maybe a little upset at the prospect of never being able to see Jirachi again once the week with Jirachi was up. That was still a major part, and even in the climax of the movie, when everything went down, there was still major stakes involved. The bad guy of that movie, Butler, wanted Jirachi for its power so that he could create a Groudon. And so, of course, that leads to greater stakes as the heroes try to keep Jirachi away from Butler. And by the end of the movie, when everything goes to hell, when Butler does make his Groudon, it still has some significant drama, and guess what? Max is still a part of the story. Yeah, Ash still does a bit of heavy lifting, but Max is at least a part of the action and is doing whatever he can to help Jirachi and stop the evil Groudon. But in this movie, May is shoved aside. Yeah, she helps Ash with putting the crystals back, but at the big climax of the movie, the big hero moment, what's May doing? She's just on the sidelines watching Manaphy and going, "That's my kid." Like, come on. This lady needs to have her be. This lady has the building blocks to have a genuine character arc here, and you're just shoving it aside because we don't want that shit. Let's have Ash be the big hero here, and that's dumb. I was willing to kind of accept it with Lucario and the Mr. Mew because Ash was a central figure in there, but it's dumb here. And kind of in that same vein, like I said, going back to the power-up, I'm never going to stop talking about this, is also dumb. Again, going back to Lucario and the Mr. Mew, Ash taking Sir Aaron's gloves and trying to utilize the power of Aura to help the Tree of Beginnings felt more epic there because there was genuine stakes involved, and basically it was a win-or-lose situation. If they had everything to gain and everything to lose, regardless of how this went, and even if they won here, there was a chance that Ash could die. So there was still some significant drama there, which led to Ash using the power of Aura feel like a much bigger deal than it was because even if it's some kind of even if it's a BS superpower that was being pulled up at the last minute, it at least made sense for Ash to want to try it because the consequences of him not trying it were very severe. Here the power up looks so stupid and it doesn't make any sense, and they tried to make it look epic and they failed. They failed miserably, and it doesn't work for that, and it does not work. So, yeah, that's another problem against this movie. A secondary problem is, unfortunately, the Phantom. I don't hate this guy like a lot of other people do, and I do find and I do like the idea behind his villain arc to be kind of amusing. I kind of would compare him to the Iron Mask Marauder in terms of entertainment value in some regard. Only I feel like the Phantom is a little bit more campy, as he does kind of lean more into the stereotypical pirate tropes more, and it does make him a little bit more fun to watch. With that said, unfortunately, there's nothing really memorable about him as a villain either. There's nothing really that complex about him there's nothing really complex about him as his motivations are simply, I want power because I want power. And even then, if you want to just say he's like a campy Saturday morning villain, well, he doesn't really have that much going for him either. He doesn't really have a lot of gimmicks that make him that very fun to watch. The most we get from him is again the pirate stuff, which doesn't really get played up to the point where it should be almost funny. And him occasionally having a catchphrase where he says, "There are two types of men in this world," and then makes comparisons saying that there's one person who doesn't have this ambition and another that does, and that he's in the latter count. So what can you do? So there's something that, so yeah, he has a lot of that, but beyond that, he's just not very memorable as a villain. He's not awful by any means, because like I said, there were some times that I enjoyed seeing him on screen, but in terms of memorable arcs, this guy doesn't have much in the way of that either. And then, unfortunately, there's Jackie. I hate this prick. I do not like him. This guy is pompous, full of himself, and just thinks that he's the dashing hero that everybody else needs, when really, he's the guy that showed up to the party that no one asked to come. And unfortunately, he thinks he's a bigger deal than he is in this movie. Because to kind of give it, to kind of say this right now, He could have been written out of this movie and nothing would have changed. Oh, actually, let me take that back a little bit. There would be a couple scenes in this movie that would have changed if he wasn't there. But I could argue that those scenes could have easily been rewritten, because the only two times, in my opinion, in this movie where his appearance contributed so much to the plot was the prologue and the scene where he fought the Phantom for the crystals. And both of those scenes, in my opinion, could have very easily been rewritten and changed, as you could have easily had it maybe Elizabeth and her family were the ones that stole the egg, because maybe they're tied to the whole thing with the sea, that maybe to the Temple of the Sea, and that maybe the remnants of the people of the water are keeping an eye on people who are looking for those, and they knew that the Phantom was bad news and was going to potentially harm someone, so maybe they stepped in to help. And likewise, the stuff with the Phantom, you could have maybe easily argued that maybe in the flooding he lost his footing and fell off a railing with one of the crystals. So that's immediately something that can get thrown out of the water, no pun intended. And the only other factor that Jackie placed into the plot is the BS Balls drama in the second act. And again, that drama is nothing short of forced. It is unnecessary, because his argument for why he thinks May and Manaphy should not be close is because he thinks that once the time comes for Manaphy to go on its merry way, it won't want to leave May. Except the thing is, at no point prior to this moment did May or Manaphy show any semblance that they were not going to part ways by the end. They were, of course, happy, and May realized how important Manaphy was to everything, and even when she overheard Ash and Jackie talking about their connection, even she said, "No, I get it. I'll be fine. I understand that I'm going to have to let Manaphy go." And in the third act of the movie, we can see that Manaphy does understand the importance of its role in the goings on for the Sea Temple. So while they may not part ways on happy terms, at the same time they're still willing to part ways because they know they both have their own lives. They'll miss each other, they'll love each other still, but they know they're going to part ways. And so Jack coming in and saying, "You can't get too close to Manaphy," is some bullshit and causes unnecessary character drama where none needed to exist. Seriously, what point did it serve other than to make May feel miserable and cause Manaphy to go, "Why isn't Mama hanging out with me anymore?" It's just bullshit. You literally could have filled it up with anything. Literally, the entire second act could have been used to build character stuff. And admittedly, it is to a degree. We learn a little bit more about Jackie, and I'll give credit where it's due. I do like his backstory, but a good backstory does not a good character make, because Jackie is a dick. He's an asshole. He thinks he's so much more important than he really is, when in reality, he's a cocky dick who just keeps pushing people away because he has to be the hero, even though he does nothing in this movie. Despite the fact that this movie is called Pokémon Ranger and the Temple of the Sea, the titular Pokémon Ranger may as well be a side character at best. He could be written out at worst. He is not important in this movie, and you could literally just write him out of the story, and with maybe a couple rewrites here and there, nothing would change. Everything would go exactly as it did without him, and everything would have been fine. Jackie is unnecessary, and as a character, I don't like him. Seriously, the first time that I started getting a bad vibe from him was when he told Ash and Co, "You guys can't join us for the rest of this journey. You're already in too deep, and this is Pokemon Ranger business." Even though Ash and Co clearly are neck deep in this already, and Manaphy has already built an emotional attachment to May, so maybe, just maybe, it's a good idea to keep them involved at least to some degree. So I don't know, it's annoying, and that gets to me. And all of these factors really come together and make a film that, in my opinion, goes from bland to bleh. Like, again, there are aspects of the film that I like. Like, the film is fucking gorgeous. Like most shots in this film are just a joy and a pleasure to look at. I do find that, I do like that. I like the journey of getting to the Sea Temple. Manaphy is a lot of fun. The Phantom, if they had a bit more to him, could easily be a very fun villain in his own regard. But I'm sorry to say that this film doesn't really do it for me as either a Pokemon movie or just as a movie in general. Like I like Man of E's relationship, but like with Max and Jirachi, it should have had more to it. But unlike Max and Jirachi, this one should have been a core part of the movie. Instead, it isn't, and as a result, there's really no emotional attachment between any of the main characters and what goes on in the movie. And if the main characters aren't emotionally invested in this movie beyond, well, it's the right thing to do, then why should the audience get invested? And that's another thing that keeps holding it back. Then there's the titular Pokemon Ranger, who's really just there because I guess someone wanted to advertise the Pokemon Ranger game, which I actually have played, and I do like that game. I recommend it if you want to play it. But otherwise, he's not important to the movie. The villain could have done a lot better. Even the climax is just plain stupid. So when it comes down to it, well, this isn't the worst movie ever. It's not even a horrible movie. I just think it's a dumb one. It's bland at best, and just kind of a at worst. It's not the worst thing ever, and I think if you watched it, I don't think you'd be like seething with rage or anything, which kind of feels contradictory considering how much I ranted just now about Jackie and his involvement in this movie. But there are much better Pokemon movies you could be spending your time watching right now, and as a result, I don't think this one is for you. It's not awful by any means. It does have some moments here and there that I do enjoy, but for the most part, I don't think this film was a good first outing for the Funimation cast. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. Now, if you like the movie, good on you. Hope you keep liking it. This is just my opinion, but regardless of this film's quality, I hope you enjoyed my mad ramblings for this hour and 4 minutes, it seems. And as always, I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope you tune in next week as we leave the advance era of the anime behind, as we go into Diamond and Pearl, and, well, we actually see the beginning of a story arc unfold with The Rise of Darkrai.